In God we trust. And I wrote to my friend Vinny, who said this, it's not about what the majority of the people believe in, it's what the Constitution says. The government shall make no laws establishing religion.
Let's just stop you there. It doesn't say establishing a religion. Right. Respecting an establishment of religion. Much
Yeah,
broader.
no, I didn't get too precise. I'm sure he doesn't.
Okay.
And it's going to be up to the Supreme Court to decide if the government is violating the Constitution. And then I add, I don't think the Supreme Court is going to rule against the use of "In God We Trust."
We'll see. We'll see if they uphold the ideas. I mean, those polls, and I try to get this across. You know, if you ask people, would you like to get gasoline for under $1? I think that most Americans would say yes. But you say, well, would you like to invade Venezuela to do that? Well, then no. You know, would you like to have clothes that are dirt cheap? Yeah. But do you want 8-year-old kids working 12 hours a day? The answer is no. So if they ask the right question, they get a very different result. If you ask Americans, not do you want in God we trust on our coins and currency, but do you want government respecting all religious views equally? I think that we probably get 86% on our side. And that's the question. They haven't asked that in the polls. So the poll means nothing because it's not asking the basic issue, addressing the basic issue. Yeah?
I think Congress is cherry picking. I think if I should put a chaplain warning on mine that says it's easier for a camel to fit through an eye in the middle than for a rich guy to get into heaven. They seem to forget that one all the time, you know. So that's a. So weird that we even have God on money. I would say that religious people should think it's almost sacrilege.
And many do, some do. I mean, the whole idea, you know, a motto is supposed to be, you know, it distills down the essence of what we stand for, okay? And we, the country that gave it, you know, of all the stuff, Gary Wills talks about this, he says, you know, of everything that we have in our Constitution, the tripartite government, the bicameral legislature, the states' rights, and federalism, all that stuff was out there. There were societies that had that kind of stuff. We borrowed and put this together this way. But the anti-establishment clause, that idea that government won't establish it, that's ours. That's all the United States. We gave that to the world. And as our motto, right, we, having said that we are this bastion of religious freedom, of all the things we could have chosen, in liberty we trust, in honesty we trust, in equality we trust, or the other forms that we could have, you don't have to use that form. But of all the things, we choose in God we trust. I mean, it would be a joke if we hadn't done it. It's insane. It's insane.
It seems so backwards now in European countries.
Yeah, they don't have it. They're very secular.
That's a lot more atheistic, especially in Scandinavian
Right.
countries. And so atheists don't bleed a lot. Religious people want to have a lot of kids.
Yes.
Do you see the public's perceived threat from Islam today as a benefit or a hindrance to your efforts?
I think it's important just that I can use that analogy like I just used before. We have in Christianity we trust, or Jesus we trust, because you know, our foe is no longer the atheist, now it's the Muslim. And notice how carefully President Bush is to not do that. So I think it's important there. And to show, you know, you can become prejudiced. I mean, you know, the framers talked about this nonstop. They talked about, look at the harms that happen when you get government and religion. You know, they went through the Crusades and the Inquisition. Madison, in his Memorial and Remonstrance, it's a very famous document. Briefly, Patrick Henry came up with an idea, right? And it was actually a progressive idea at the time. He came up with this idea. He said, okay, let's have a bill to establish a provision for teachers of the Christian religion, not just the Anglican Church. This was in Virginia. The Anglican Church was the established church of Virginia. He says, no, let's have a bill to establish a provision for teachers of any of the Christian sects, right? A bill to establish. And Madison said, who does not see that the same authority which can establish Christianity in exclusion of all other sects, all other religions, can establish with the same ease any particular sect of Christians in exclusion of all other sects? He says, look at this thing. And the same thing here. Who doesn't see that the same authority which can exclude atheists, right, in deference to the monotheistic religions, can also exclude any monotheistic religion? I mean, and they went through this. They went through it over and over again. He said, look at the Crusades. He says, sure. He says, even this bill, it says, distant as it may be from the Inquisition, it differs from it only in degree. One is the first step, the other the last in the career of intolerance. They talked about this stuff constantly. And for these people today not to realize, I mean, pick up a newspaper. What's going on in Iraq? What are we spending these billions of dollars on? Because the Shiites are fighting the Sunnis, right? Go look in Northern Ireland, look in Indonesia, in Kosovo, in Sudan. I mean, we see religious wars nonstop. It hasn't ended. Right? And why we would want to have that same thing here? It's just mind-boggling. We had it here, by the way, once. The Philadelphia Bible riots. I don't know if you're familiar with it. In 1844, the Catholics, Justice Scalia, Thomas, the 5 justices, Catholic justices on our Supreme Court might bear in mind that the Catholics got very upset because the books that were being used in the public schools in Philadelphia were actually all over the country were the King James version, the Protestant version, and they thought they should have the Douay version in their schools. Okay? Well, understand, this is 2 translations of the same thing. You're still getting your Jesus words, your Trinity, you just don't like the words. And there were 13 people died. They had riots, buildings were burned, churches were burned in the United States of America because of this fighting. Now, if you could understand that those people would fight, because the Catholics were upset because they couldn't get their Bible into school to make a different translation of the same words, then you ought to be able to understand that we're upset, that you're saying the exact opposite of what we think and telling us that there's this God when we don't believe there is. So, any long answer to the question I answered. Yes, in the back.
In light that the 98 senators were out on the Capitol steps.
99.
99.
Jesse Helms was actually, he was the one who was on my side, but he was in the hospital.
There's 99 of those professing in God we trust, or one nation under God. So when you win your case this time around at the Supreme Court, what do you think the chances are there'll be a constitutional convention to amend the Constitution? Because when you talk about that kind of support from the Senate and the 86% poll,
That's the question that everyone understands. Will we get backlash? Will all I'm doing, if I'm successful, first of all, getting to the Supreme Court, I don't count on that. As I said, that's not up to me. I have to win in the district, in the Ninth Circuit. We'll see what happens. But if it does go to the Supreme Court, will there be a constitutional amendment? I don't think so. The ACLU won't support me on this. Nobody supports me on this because we're afraid that's exactly what's going to happen. The American Jewish Congress wrote a brief against me at the Supreme Court for that very reason, because they're afraid I'm going to win. Again, I think if you tell the American, they're not that stupid, okay? People understand. I just was in Alabama, and I spoke with Roy Moore, and there were a whole bunch of us invited by a church. So these are all, Bible-thumping Baptists out there. And it was amazing how many, after I had this debate with Roy Moore, came over to me and said, "You're right. We didn't understand it. They think that that we're challenging, they get fed by their preachers that, people are after the Christians and depriving Christians of rights. When they understand nobody's doing that I will stand up for Christians just as I will for atheists, right? That's not what this is about. They realize, hey, we do believe in equality. So if we change the polls, instead of asking, do you want God we trust there, and get some mindless answer because, yeah, we like God, but we know the answer is going to be yeah, because that's why we have an establishment clause. They put that in there because they knew if you did a poll, people would want their religion in government. That's why we have the thing there. But if you change the question and you say, do you understand that this is protecting everybody, this is just treating everyone equally, I think the American people won't vote for that. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think so. Yes, sir.
Last week, I was on a website, and I don't remember how I got there, and I can't exactly remember the name. Maybe someone in here knows me.
I was on it.
Pardon?
I was on it too.
Where they're encouraging people to cross the non-trust off of the money and replace with some other words or something. Is that illegal?
It's not illegal. The law is you can't make it so, you can't change it so that you're trying to make it into something it isn't, like take a $1 bill and make it 100, or you can't make it so it's not usable. So you can't do it. You know how many bills they print? We're going to have every atheist would have to spend the next 20 years all day going like this to even see another one of those. You can do it. I've done it at times. But I like my method better. Stop printing it. Yes, no.
Just for the record, I want to mention that the American Humanist Association did file
Did
an
support.
amicus brief,
That's right.
and we were criticized by a lot of groups with the same response. Well, now you're going to cause a constitutional amendment. This is the same criticism that the gay rights movement encountered. It's the same criticism that the Stephen Fetchits in the civil rights movement encountered. If we're going to be afraid of backlash, we're never going to get anywhere. And that's the attitude of the American Humanist Association.
Here, here. Thank you. American Jewish Congress, I was so upset. All the groups. Just terrible. But anyway. Yes, sir. If anybody wants to leave, I won't feel slighted.
What about advocating a dual